Thank you for joining us, everyone. I know it's been quite a semester, and that is the theme of today's session. So this session is called Teaching Remotely in a Pandemic, Lessons from Fall 2020. And this is in part of the Supporting Flexible Instructional Skills Development, a collaborative teaching and learning series that's been co-hosted through the offices of the Associate Dean Academics in the College of Social and Applied Human Sciences and the Gordon S. Laing School of Business and Economics. So just going through a bit of housekeeping. And I guess to echo what Jackie just said, we are recording this session, but only the first portion where we have a bit of a presentation to share with you, some tips, strategies, and some perspectives. So if you can please remain on mute during the presentation. And if you do have any questions, I think my setup has a chat that it should be able to go live here so I can see it on my side. But we'll also, that's the beauty of this co-facilitation. We'll also hold space for questions at the end. And so this recording will also be made available. So if you do have to pop in, pop out, it will be made available afterwards, as well as a copy of the slides, so that any asynchronous materials that we reference, we want to make sure that you have access to them through our respective CSAWs and Laing websites. And those links are also provided at the end. So we want to thank you for sticking with us this semester. We had a very successful summer webinar series that there was 9 webinars in total that we were able to co-facilitate. And it was our pleasure. It's the fun part of our jobs and our different roles across the School of Business and Economics and CSAWs. So my name is Chris Donaldson. I'm the current manager of academic programs. And I've also had the privilege of teaching 4 courses this past semester outside of here, so on top of everything else. So I just wanted to reiterate that a lot of the lessons that we've learned, we've also had to apply in our own teaching practice as well. So 2 courses I currently teach are synchronously remote. And I have students who are in rural and low bandwidth areas as well. So I've had to walk the walk from a lot of our past webinars and actually apply what we've been doing in practice. And Jackie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Hamilton, for those of you who haven't met me before. And same thing as Chris, really looking forward to spending some time with you today. I was also teaching this semester, so there's definitely a lot of great things in the literature and in the research on this, but there is something different about living it, as I'm sure all of you have experienced this semester. So looking forward to diving in and sharing some information about that with all of you today. So let's get started.
All right. So as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, having attended past webinars with Jackie and I, that we do want to preface everything with what are our intended learning outcomes of the session. So for today, we wanted this to be an opportunity that we will all be able to examine evidence-focused instructional approaches for effective student engagement and motivation, evaluate small but effective instructional strategies for use in remote and alternative delivery, and then have a chance to actually debrief together, share ideas, and really learn from what happened over this past semester in the remote and alternative delivery practice.
Okay, so where are these tips and tricks coming from? I think it's important that Chris and I aren't just kind of talking heads up here, sharing information. So we wanted to give you just a little bit of background about where we're coming from. So we've spent a lot of time this summer, this semester, and I mean, we do this anyway. We've just spent maybe a little more time than normal trying to consolidate from research and resources about, what exactly is working well, what maybe in theory we thought in March was going to work well, but turns out in practice isn't. So we've tried to consolidate from research and resources. We've been reading nonstop, looking at different books, different things of that sort. But we also, because we have the privilege to work with so many instructors, we've really had the opportunity to provide some collective feedback and expertise of instructors. So Chris and I will have one-on-one conversations, we'll have group conversations. And so we've been able to pull out some major themes, trends about what's working, what's not, or what some key questions are. So that's where the background is coming today. It's a combination of research and kind of informal theory devolved from our own practices. And so a thank you to all of the instructors who have been engaging with us, because you've really given us a lot of insight. As much as Chris and I are teaching, that's just one data point. So you've given us lots of data points by reaching out and being engaged and involved with us. So thank you for that. So without further ado, we want to just launch right into those tips and tricks. So one of the things that we've heard collectively from instructors this fall is that office hours have looked different, and they've been a bit challenging. So this creative office hours strategy is adapted from Small Teaching Online, which is a book by James Lang and Flower Darby. It just came out in 2019, so kind of published at a good time, I'll say. But these were some things that they kind of went through, and they did a little bit of a meta-analysis of research as well, but they are also experts in teaching and learning. And this is what they came back with in terms of creative office hour strategies. So one was rebrand them. Office hours struggled across the board in online teaching scenarios to really capture the interest of students. And information is showing that rebranding them to things like happy hours, coffee breaks, consultations really shifted the focus onto the learner and made that time more useful. Another thing that they recommended doing was scheduling and announcing them ahead of time. So having them listed in the syllabus from day one, the course outline from day one, really solidified for students what was happening. They kind of had that schedule in advance and they knew what to expect. Also consider reducing the frequency. For example, 4 60-minute sessions in a semester, research has shown that that's been more effective. And students will maybe focus their energy in on those sessions when there's not as many of them. They also had a note, if you didn't want to schedule in advance, try polling the class for best times to schedule. But what seemed to be really critical was that you kind of scheduled them all at once for the whole semester. That seemed to be a consistent piece across the research. Another piece too was collecting questions in advance. This way you're prepared with responses in advance and you have a bit of an idea. And it helps to avoid some of that potentially awkward, okay, office hours have started or consultations have started, any questions? And you have just complete silence and black screens with no video, which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point. So collecting questions in advance was a good way to try to mitigate some of that. Another consideration was potentially offering incentives. Note, if you do this, please try to include a comparable learning opportunity for those unable to attend, because the creative office hours are now outside of class times and students may have another course or they may have work commitments, something of that manner. But a really quick way to do this is to record them and ask students who couldn't attend if they want the incentive to watch them and respond to 3 or 4 questions about them. So not a ton of work for the instructor because you're just recording the work that you're already doing. So I do want to be clear that the recommendation from the research was that you try to do as many of these things as possible in order to see the gains. So, if you go in next semester and you change the name of your office hours, but you don't do anything else, you might not see the same changes. But these were some small changes from the research around office hours that we wanted to share with you, because we were hearing from instructors that office hours were one of the things that were maybe not well attended, or people were taking advantage of emailing individually, which is not a bad thing, but definitely more work on the instructor. So if you can steer people towards those office hours, it can really reduce some of the workload.
All right. So further to, I guess, dive in here. So CourseLink, I wanted to preface this that CourseLink is the University of Guelph's iteration of Brightspace by D2L as the learning management system predominantly used across most of our academic units. And this is centrally managed by Open Learning and Educational Support. And so they do have dedicated people. The CourseLink support team are fantastic. They're available. And OpenEd also has instructional technology specialists that are able to provide any additional guidance here. But Jackie and I wanted to really highlight some of the tools that you're probably already using, but we wanted to kind of reiterate the value that they can bring. We've talked about this in past webinars over the summer webinar series about the use of rubrics. They really help minimize, it reduces the time and effort in order to assess a student's achievement on course activities when you have those set criteria established, that an excellent in this presentation assignment is followed by this certain criteria and it's worth X amount of points, so that students are clear from the start. Oh, in the assignment instructions, there's a rubric there. Please refer to that. That explains everything. And any points of clarification, you can use those office hour strategies that Jackie mentioned. But being able to actually evaluate student assignments within Dropbox or within the discussions, it's so straightforward. And I found that my students over the past semester, I got a lot less questions about, well, how did I get this grade? Why did I get this grade? When I can say, well, here's the specific evidence that I use, look at the feedback I've provided, but also the criteria was set in the rubric and you had that in the assignment beforehand. So it's ensuring that that criteria in your assignment instructions is also consistent with how the evaluation is taking place within the rubric tools. And then within the rubric tools, you do have spaces that you can add additional feedback, specific feedback of pertaining to the achievement of what those levels and criteria were. You also have the opportunity to provide audio feedback. So this is a chance that, especially on assignments that there might be more of a complicated response you might have to provide to students, instead of spending the time typing it all out, you can then record a quick couple-minute clip. And then it's also demonstrated through research as well that it then leads to further engagement from the students, because now there's that connection to the faculty member, the instructor, who's actually provided and taken the time to provide that feedback. And I know Jackie has had experience with this directly. In terms of the announcements, this is one of the things that I do. I set up weekly announcements as touch points. Here's what are the expectations for this week, or here are reminders that this week will be asynchronous, or this week will be synchronous, but here are the other activities that are due. Here's a chance to provide updates on different assignments. What are the due dates? What's coming up? And you can schedule these all in advance. That's the beauty of it, that you can have them set to come live at certain times based on date restrictions. The table of contents, the reason we put this here was for a couple of reasons. So whether you're structuring your table of contents based on modules, so module 1, 2, 3, 4, or week 1, 2, 3, 4, or January 11th, January 18th, whatever it is, it's a way of structuring the order and flow of your course. It's your course skeleton. But each of those modules that you set up, you can also add in a description to say, here's the expectations of this particular week or this particular module. So in one of my courses, I teach synchronously and asynchronously. So those asynchronous components, I was able to then set this up to say, hey, I've got an announcement. Oh, but if you went directly to the table of contents and you looked at week 5, you've got the expectations for that week. And the reason we're bringing this up in particular is that it helps mitigate the volume of individual emails from students who are asking, wait, what was I supposed to do again? And then further to that, having due dates assigned in your Dropbox folders in the discussion periods. These are things that I found from my own practice have helped keep students on track. So those due dates, based on your settings, can integrate into the calendar widget. So the students are then getting reminders about upcoming due dates and deadlines. So I have my modules set up that they're date restricted because I'm teaching applied geomatics. I don't want students working ahead. That's based off of my disciplinary my approach to teaching these concepts. And so those also fold into the calendar widget that they can see now at a glance. Here are all the things that are upcoming. And then in terms of group and collaborative assignments, especially in larger class sizes, taking advantage of the groups tool, you can then have smaller group discussions take place within your across sections, but you can also do it. And I'm sure this might not be new information for a lot of you, and I recognize that it's quite a breadth of representation across the university that's present right now. But having your groups also assigned to different Dropbox folders means that you can have students working collaboratively on one assignment, submit it as one assignment, and you can evaluate that one assignment instead of evaluating multiple submissions by the similar group members. So the groups are there, they're great. And it's a way of, especially in large classroom sizes, of mimicking what a smaller class size feel would be in a virtual environment. And so specifically around asynchronous student engagement, this isn't necessarily only for asynchronous, like alternate delivery asynchronous. It's specifically around how can you engage with your students asynchronously outside of those synchronous class times, outside of those scheduled times, whether you're fully asynchronous or not. And there's going to be some things that I've mentioned in the previous slide, but I wanted to bring them forward specifically around this concept of student engagement. So this is also, these are reminders that will hopefully lead to less questions in your email inbox if you're able to front load them to your students. So weekly course link announcements. This has worked so well with mitigating the volume of emails in my own inbox. It's a way that students now know, and they now know that there's an expectation that the layout of what's expected over the next week is available. So for me to go in on a Sunday and spend 5 minutes going through the course schedule and in populating that, and then reflecting on the past week of what are those kind of things that we should be focusing on, put it in as an announcement. I schedule it to go live at 8:30 on Monday morning. It's there, it's done. You can also schedule out reminder emails based on due dates, different assignment deadlines, just as a chance to prompt students. The one area that I was trying to focus the Seesaw Super 7 Instructional and Technical Support Student Assistant team was on around developing resources to support the implementation of intelligent agents this past term. This is a chance to nudge students based on a number of cases, a number of different instances. It takes a little bit of work behind the scenes through your course admin to set them up, but the common uses that are here would be such as like a student hasn't accessed your course in 2 weeks, or they didn't review module 4's content, or they did complete all the tasks on a checklist, or they earned 80% on a particular quiz or assignment, to give those congratulations. So it's not just meant to be, you haven't signed in, it's also, hey, you've done really good work. And I know the folks in CBS had a lot of great experience using intelligent agents as a part of the Science Insight Student Success Initiative. So the intelligent agents, once you have them set up, it will automatically send out the custom message that you want to go out to your students. And you can copy it to yourself if you want. That's up to you. Another thing that has been more or less a default, especially in distance education deliveries, was having kind of an ask your professor, ask your prof discussion forum. It's a intentional way that if students do have questions related to the course and they don't have questions that are of a personal nature, it's directing them to the discussion forums to ask those questions. It does mean that you have to engage and check in and respond to them within those discussion forums, but it also helps mitigate a lot of the email back and forth. So if a student had a question around a specific topic or specific content, there may have been several other students who had that same question that might also want to be emailing you individually. But if they can all post it in one place, you could answer it. It's now a reference point that you can go back to, and also something to reflect back on a future delivery of why were there so many questions pertaining to a certain area. And then lastly, just reiterating within the table of contents in your modules, your module description, you can then add in additional content there, a description around what that module is about, what the expectations are. And then you can always edit it, or you can always edit future modules too, to say what specific expectations are there.
Thanks, Chris. The one thing I just want to highlight with the course link too is we're hearing from students that those features aren't being utilized very often. So we're hearing from them that they have, maybe one instructor who's using the course link features and that's been really helpful, but their other courses aren't. And it's making them harder to go through and find the reminders and keep up with that. So a lot of these are quick things you can do that take, you can reuse content. So I email my class every week with the updates, but I just copy and paste my announcement into the email and they were pre-scheduled. So it took me about, an hour in the first week of September, last week of August to confirm those, set them up, can always go back and edit it if I want to add something real quick before it's published to go out, in week 7. And then the descriptions I put about what they need to do for each week. I also include and copy and paste aspects of those instructions. So we're finding a lot in this environment that students are asking the same questions multiple times. They're having trouble remembering, okay, well, in this course, the information was here, but in this course it's here, and they can't remember. So I know it seems really redundant to, send an email, put an announcement up, add the deadlines into the Dropbox, but it actually provides CourseLink the opportunity to do all of the reminding for you. And it takes a lot of stress off of you to then respond to questions around when is assignment 6 due or whatever it may be. And again, you don't need to, write a custom announcement and write a custom email and all of this for each week. You can literally copy and paste and lift those in and have that set up in advance. So that's a quick, easy thing you can do that can really provide some high impact for the students. And we're also hearing from students that maybe their instructors do this for weeks 1, 2, and 3, and then they stop. And they've kind of gotten used to what they can expect. And then all of a sudden those reminders and those updates go away, and that can be really difficult. So setting them up for the whole course in advance can be a good way to, get it done so that once your semester is really busy, you don't have to spend time trying to catch up. The other thing we wanted to reiterate was you can use course design principles to help prioritize your time. So I hear from everyone that it can be really, really challenging to figure out where to start. So go back to those core questions of course design, right? What things do you expect your students to be able to do? How do you want to get that information to your students? How are you going to assess those things? So when it feels like you've got too many moving parts, go back to those 3 things and try to prioritize based on that. Another thing is think like a student. This is a virtual room full of very intelligent people who, have PhDs and have done a lot of great work or been industry leaders. It's hard to remember what it's like to be 17, 18 for our traditionally aged students and remember what it feels like to not understand some of these concepts, especially at the undergraduate level. So try to think like a student. How might they misinterpret that? And the best way you can do that too is, ask your students, try to solicit some feedback from them. The other thing too that is really highly recommended is making your rationale front and center. So a lot of times I think we have ideas as instructors around, oh, this is going to be really cool. They're really going to enjoy this. This is really going to work. This is really meaningful. And then we get that feedback from students saying, I don't get why we did this. And you're like, oh, I really thought that was going to be excellent. So if you can make your rationale front and center, you'll notice a difference in student engagement. So saying things like, we are doing X activity today, and this is how it's connected to what we're doing. This is what you need to get out of it. Be so clear because you want your students to spend their time being, not being confused, but trying to figure out the content of your course and the skill development. You don't want them trying to figure out the point of the activity so that they can get to the skill development. Take that out altogether. Put your rationale, your teaching rationale front and center when you're having them do things. Let them know why you've selected the activities you've selected. Flexibility meets clarity. This is another thing that we're hearing a lot of. We want to be flexible, but sometimes maybe we're being too flexible. So, week 4, we're going, this doesn't work. Let's try something completely different. And it's hard for the students to scramble. And then it can feel like no matter what we're doing as instructors, it's not working. And maybe it's really a matter of we're making a little bit of too many changes when we're trying to be flexible. So you've got to be really clear about those expectations and stick with what you said you would do in the outline and be flexible within those things. You don't have to do it all. What we're also hearing a lot of is people adding a lot of activities to their courses, but they're not removing things. So if you add, 10 active learning activities to your course, but you don't transition maybe some other activities out, that can be very burdensome on the instructor, and it can be very burdensome on the student. So just a reminder, I'll give an example, and it took me a while to wrap my head around this. I added a couple of active learning activities in, and I realized that meant I was going to need to lose 1 or 2 of my readings. And it's not that that information went away or that skill or that knowledge development went away. It meant that I transitioned the active learning activity to make sure it was meeting the same outcomes or learning targets as the reading. But if we just keep adding, what we're doing is we're adding burden for ourselves, and we're adding burden for the students. So a reminder that you don't have to do it all. You've got options there. The other thing that's been working really well is aligning techniques to pedagogy. So just in discussions with some instructors, some people come in and they're like, I just can't wait to use breakout rooms. It's like really, really excited that you're passionate about breakout rooms and that that's a technique you want to use, but does it actually match what you're trying to do? How is it aligned with the outcomes? So sometimes we hear, I put them in breakout rooms and then I find out they're just sitting there in silence. Well, there might be a misalignment between that technique and what it is you want them to learn. So oftentimes that's happening because students don't have the foundational knowledge to have the conversation you're asking them to have in small groups. Sometimes maybe there's an additional technique you can add in. So maybe you can ask them to do an icebreaker in their small groups first. That usually gets things going. But oftentimes when we see something not working, it's because we've got a misalignment somewhere. So I just wanted to highlight that there are lots of resources out there to help you do that. There's a full 8-page Google Doc here that kind of takes you through a technique, some ways to do it online synchronously, some ways to do it online asynchronously. And for those of you who maybe do have face-to-face physically distanced classrooms, here are ways to still use some of these techniques. So there's just 2 up there, but like I said, that we'll be sending these slides out and there's links to this. That link takes you to about 8 pages worth of these things. And what's really cool about this resource is that it's been curated globally. So there's the University of Louisiana took a lead on it, but faculty from across the world have been submitting information. So actually you could still submit some information too if you saw something you thought that should be added. And they've been curating this global resource from faculty who've been teaching online during the pandemic about how to try to engage some of these techniques. So really important to kind of engage people based on what it is you want them to be able to do. So if it's content learning versus if it's some skill development, whether you want them to be able to apply something, they really need to be able to build on that. So checking for alignment, it doesn't take that long, but it can take some of the frustration out later on when you're like, in my example earlier, they're in breakout rooms and they're not really talking. Why is that happening? Well, they're missing something. Okay, what are they missing? Let's check the alignment. Lastly, for me, I think, and then we have 1 or 2 more tips before we'll dive into part 2 of the webinar today. Consider these high impact, low engagement opportunities. So these are things we've pulled from the literature that evidence is showing they have high impact on student learning, but they're low cost to you as the instructor and they don't take a lot of time. So one activity that consistently is being shown to provide high benefits to student understanding and learning is having students generate questions. So this benefits their knowledge translation and their understanding because it's getting them to kind of think like a prof and it's asking them to engage with the material in a higher level way. So there's lots of great research studies on this. There's one there, but really what is important about these techniques is that we need to balance students' ability to get information in and also to get information out. So I think we tend to do a really good job at finding ways to get the information in, but we also need them to have retrieval practice opportunities to get the information out because forgetting is an essential part of the learning process. When we realize we've forgotten something, we go back and we study it, which is why I used to work in the library in the Learning Commons and we'd hear from students who would say, I read it over and over again and I understood it. I don't know why I didn't get it on the exam. Well, they didn't actually remember it. They were just kind of absorbing it. So they got the information in, but they never had a check to realize that they weren't getting it out. And the generating questions has the benefit of you can do this as an activity in your class and you can collect them. And who knows, maybe there's some really good generated questions in there that you want to make use of either as a study tool for them, as questions at the end of class. These don't have to be things you grade. It can just be an activity you ask them to do. There's really easy ways that you can embed this within your own teaching practice and pass on the benefits to your students. The other thing you can do is embed checks for understanding within existing learning activities. So Microsoft Forms allows you to embed questions within Microsoft Stream videos. So if you're playing videos and they're watching them asynchronously, maybe maybe you've got a 15-minute video or a 10-minute video and you want to embed 3 questions at different times throughout the video. That's absolutely an option that you can do. Maybe you want to use polling, right? We hear from a lot of folks that, I have a large class. I don't want to be doing a lot of these things because of the amount of work that goes into it when you have, 300, 500, 600 students. Well, maybe polling's a really easy way. And you don't have to necessarily grade the polling. It can just be used as a formative technique to help students check in and keep them engaged. This last point, we're hearing a lot from students. So we actually went out and asked a bunch of students what is their favorite thing people have done, their instructors have done this semester. And they said the changing up and making it interactive. So honestly, the number of times students wrote in Kahoot was pretty outstanding. And that's a free resource that you might want to look into. There might be other gamified opportunities like that. So students really loved the high engagement. I tried it because I got the results of this survey back in week 10 or 11. So I tried for week 12. I thought no one's going to come because it's week 12. They're probably going to take a break, but I told them we would do a Kahoot and they all showed up. Not that I had like a necessarily low attendance, but I had 100% attendance, which is quite high. A bunch of students showed up ready to be Kahoot players. So we did a really nice review and we're able to engage there. The other thing that's showing is for some reason, I'll be honest, this one, I'm not really sure why. It's just a result I can share. External videos are getting higher views than when it comes to content modules. So things like TED Talks and videos from other universities that another prof has made. They're watching those more than they're watching their own prof videos. I don't know why. But that seems to be a trend that I thought I'd pass on. So maybe interlacing some of if you're doing asynchronous or if you're posting a video of yourself, maybe if you can interlace the weeks with a couple of videos from other experts that you feel comfortable and confident in the content, that might help break that up. And hey, it's one less video you have to make for your course too. So.
Great. And so as Jackie said, we only have a few more slides and it will be then moving into our debrief session. So one of the things too, and you can see there's a bit of a pattern here, rubrics keeps coming up, but we wanted to talk about being strategic with structure. Rubrics truly from my experience, have made my life a lot easier because I spent the time developing specific criteria based on my categories, based on each individual assignment, embedded them into the assignment instructions, and then copied that content over into the rubric tool in Brightspace. And it honestly, especially, it just makes my life a lot easier. But so we did spend a lot of time on rubrics in the summer webinar series, as I was talking about before, but it is a way of articulating clear expectations on what is it that you want your students to achieve? What is it that they need to do to be successful? So specifically then around feedback. So if you're one of the things that I do in my own teaching is that I try to scaffold my assignments, especially one course I teach is on learning management systems. I can't expect them to develop a course in the first assignment. I'm having them do it incrementally. And so I do this in practice. I format my feedback for here's what worked well this time, and structuring it in that intention that this is what, in this assignment, here's what worked, here's what could be improved. But then here's what can be improved for next time. What are your takeaways? How can you grow? How can your skills be improved and apply them in a future assignment? for the next activity or whatever it is within the course. So by doing that, it's shown to be very effective that students receive that, and it's no longer this is an isolation on this one assignment. Okay, this essay I didn't do really well, or I did great, and that's it. It gets tabled. It's now here's the continuum of feedback. Here's something that I can now apply, or your learners can now apply in a future situation, or if it's a scaffolded assignment or whatever it is. And the other thing, just in terms of your own well-being, your course schedule is your course schedule, scheduled around your availability. So by recognizing your own capacity to provide feedback and provide effective feedback in a timely manner, it is recommended to try and schedule things out based off of your own ability to commit to doing this for your students. So especially if you're teaching multiple courses, perhaps not scheduling major assignments or large assignments that require significant time to provide effective feedback at the same week. And depending on your academic department, it might be something too to find out how are those being structured for your students' well-being, so that they're not all having midterms across 5 courses in the same week. And this was something that did come up over the past term, that there might not have been that strong communication amongst peers or across really broader, especially in some of those elective courses, but keeping that in mind, but keeping it in mind around your own availability. So if you know there is that important chapter that you need to get completed, or you have a book deadline coming up, be real about when those assignments can be due, but also scheduling them out so that it's not a lot of things back to back too, that now your students are expecting some kind of feedback. They want to know, how are they doing? And you know you have other commitments outside of the specific teaching realm that might influence your ability to get back to them. So just emphasizing your own availability, being real about what commitments that you have inside and outside of the classroom.
Yeah, we know from the research that if you don't get feedback within students within the first 2 weeks, preferably within the first week, which is logistically hard to do. I totally get that, but I'm just saying that the research shows they use it less, and the gains they get from it decrease because it's not close enough in proximity to when they actually did the work. So, you know, if you're scheduling something and you're like, I can't get this back to them until 3-4 weeks out, maybe consider shifting the deadline so that it's due at a time when you can provide that feedback in a way that will have the most impact, right? Your schedule is important too. The last thing we wanted to share as part of the kind of tips and tricks was just a note on exam invigilation in remote environments. So this is a major theme. This is a lot of an area we're getting a lot of questions of from instructors. And I just want to preface this by neither Chris and I are the ones responsible for dealing with academic misconducts. We are not the all-knowing academic integrity people, but we didn't want to ignore talking about this because it's obviously something people are struggling with. And we didn't want to just say like, well, we can't give you 100% of the answers, so we'll ignore it. So that being said, we went back to the research, we went back to the literature to see what we could find. And so we still don't have all the answers, but we found a resource that we think might be helpful for folks to look at as they're trying to figure out what to do with exam invigilation and designing their alternative delivery formats, you know, in the space that we currently find ourselves in. So we'll make these slides available. We've got the link to that there so you can look at it, but just wanted to show you a brief screenshot of this. We found this 12-page exam invigilation remote environment guide that is an alternate course delivery guide that doesn't just focus on pedagogy. It actually pretty much only focuses on academic integrity issues in how you design. So I know we've been throwing pedagogy a lot, and I truly believe that academic integrity is strongly linked and correlated to course delivery and pedagogy. That link between pedagogy and academic integrity is real, but also what's the reality of it at the end of the day. And so one of the things that exists in this guide is this really nice flow chart that helps kind of based on your answer to these questions. This is like a 2 or 3 page flow chart. We're showing you just the tip of the iceberg with this. It actually takes you through how you can make decisions with academic integrity in mind based on, you know, faculty workload decisions, course design, that sort of thing. So I want to be really clear. I'm not saying that this design is, or this guide is the answer to 100% or all of your questions. I want to be clear that it's really important that you make the decision that's best for you in your course and your own teaching approach, philosophy, etc. But in looking at the resources out there, Chris and I thought that this guide was well done. And you may not agree with everything that's in the guide, but hopefully it at least provides you with a solid foundation to actually give you a framework when you're trying to make these decisions and what your considerations are. So this was created by an academic research center for assessment at another university. So that's why you see here, contact your ADTL, your Associate Dean Teaching and Learning. We don't have that position here, but there are lots of resources you could reach out to, like the Office of Teaching and Learning, Open Ed, of course, maybe your own Associate Dean Academic, given that they're the ones who handle academic misconduct. But we just thought that this resource was well done and does a decent job of pulling in all of the considerations for dealing with exam invigilation, and it's about 12 pages. So wanted to show that we went out and we tried to do some research for you to try to find something effective that you can use, but also recognize that we don't have all the answers to this. And at the end of the day, it rests with the instructor to make the decision that's best for them in their alternate delivery. Couple resource reminders of what is out there. So because that last flow chart referred to things that exist elsewhere, just wanted to share that we still have all the recordings and all the asynchronous materials from the webinar series in the summer. We're starting to get questions that we answered in the summer, which is good. It means people are looking at things from different perspectives, but we're starting to refer to say, oh, take a look at this, take a look here. Open Ed is running a ton of workshops, and they also offer different trainings, and you can connect with an instructional technologist there. But that can be a really great opportunity to connect in on some more of their workshops. The Office of Teaching and Learning has events as well. They run course redesign, where you can take an aspect of your course and actually spend time with them redesigning with educational developers. And they also run a book club. So this semester they did the Small Teaching Online book. And next semester they're doing the Spark of Learning book club, which looks at principles of learning development, how learning works from like a developmental and cognitive psychology perspective, I believe. Don't quote me, I haven't read it yet. But there are other resources out there that we wanted to remind folks of.
Jackie, just a quick relating to some of the questions in the chat before we move into reflective practice. One of the questions came up and has been answered. Thank you, Allison. But the one question was around pre-scheduling emails directly from CourseLink. And so I had looked that up too. And so thanks, Allison, for getting back. You can't pre-schedule your emails to go from CourseLink. You can do that within Outlook. You can pre-schedule your announcements, but they won't necessarily email your students. Mm-hmm. And then the second part, Jackie, would you recommend redundancy in terms of using the announcements and email reminders? Like, are you using the exact same information when you said copy and paste?
Yeah, literally copy and pasting. So initially in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to use the same thing. I want students to see that like I'm writing multiple reminders to them. And then I realized, basically just got answers being like, in your announcement, you said this, but in your email, it was worded this way. So like, which one is it? And I'd be like, okay, I was literally just paraphrasing myself and now I'm causing myself problems. So I literally copy and paste my announcements into the email and hit send. And I literally copy and paste some aspects of the announcement into the description on content on CourseLink about what's expected. And sometimes it just says like, here are your readings for the week. Make sure you look at these before you come to class. But it just gives them that extra bit of guidelines. Yeah, it is too bad that we can't schedule those from CourseLink, but honestly, I just imported my class list. And sometimes if I edited, imported my class list into Outlook. And sometimes if I was editing the announcement, then I just went to the class list feature, hit email all, and then hit copy paste and hit send. It blind CCs the entire class that way. So it took me about 10-15 seconds to do the copy and paste. So it's not too bad, but yeah, I would recommend redundancy, because when I tried to be cleverly redundant, it didn't go well, but that was just my experience. Mhm. Okay, so we're going to transition now to an opportunity to hear more from all of you. Some of you may recognize this all the way from May, and I'm wondering if we just want to talk about this slide, Chris, and then jump right in. So we've got a little sheet around reflective practice and what it is, and we'll share that. But a lot of you, I think, know this. It's something that I'm sure a lot of us tell our students to do. But we just want to have an opportunity to talk with each other. And what we'd really appreciate, we're going to go into breakout rooms in a moment, but if someone's willing to record and pull together some of this information, that would be great, because what we'd like to do is share collectively things that people did that were really impactful, so that we then have a resource, obviously shared aggregately. So thinking about, the teaching element, what are you going to do for the winter, or thinking about how the fall went, maybe self-assessing, you have some thoughts, you have some reflections, you have considerations you want to think about, and then moving into the winter, you're obviously going to be practicing those things. But we just want to take a moment to come back to that cycle so that we don't, do those same errors. So I shared in the spring that I just have a notebook and I just write the date, the topic, and I just write some notes to myself about how the class went. And what I find that does is it stops me from making the same mistake, or not making the same adjustment that I wanted to do. So I usually get then, the next semester I go, oh, I forgot I wanted to say this. And now I'm writing the same note to myself. So that notebook just provides me with a way to engage in reflective practice. It's the way I do it. It's not the way you have to do it, but it takes me about 2 minutes at the end of class to go, this is how it went. Yes, I would do this the same way again, or next time I want to add X. So we want to have an opportunity for all of you to share with each other, because there's a wealth of knowledge in this virtual room. By putting into breakout rooms, we'd really appreciate if someone is willing to record so we can come back together and pull together a list of things that worked well in the fall, or additional challenges. So Chris and I can also work on trying to meet those for the winter. So I can't remember if the slide's you or me, Chris. Am I talking over you?
We're in this together. And I apologize, because this is the reality. I'm in my dining room. I've got snoring puppies behind me. So I'm sure you've had some guest speakers or guest assistants pop into your classrooms or classes. And I do know that a number of people do need to jump off, and we thank you for joining us. But we also did hear a lot of feedback from people that they really wanted to connect with one another, and maybe not within the same department, across departments, and just find out what are the challenges that you encountered. Like, these are the real lessons that you experienced, whether you're in Zoom and suddenly Zoom crashed. What happened? So we wanted to get a chance to gather some of your perspectives, your experiences. And just as we did back in May, we want to then consolidate and actually be able to share with you a list of, like, here are the lessons learned from fall 2020. Because Jackie and I, we have our own experiences, but we're two people. And so we really want to gather from the expertise, the experiences that you had. What worked well, what didn't, lessons learned, and then, so I think, Jackie, you're going to set up the breakout rooms.